very urgent. Your soulmate is about to say goodbye forever. Please don't ignore this. My beloved child. Someone you love has reached a moment they never thought would come. They keep telling themselves that saying goodbye is the only way to stop the endless questions inside their heart. Every memory of you makes that decision harder, yet every day of silence makes it feel more necessary. They aren't leaving because they stopped caring. They're leaving because they believe they've misunderstood this connection for far too long. But one quiet detail has escaped their attention, and before this goodbye becomes final, that hidden detail is about to return in the most unexpected way. Don't skip, because what happens next changes the meaning of everything they thought they knew. Over the last few days, something strange has been happening. The more they try to forget you, the more your presence finds its way back into their thoughts. A familiar place, an old conversation, even a passing moment has reminded them of feelings they believed had disappeared. Then someone unexpectedly mentioned your name in a way they never expected to hear. Those few words planted a question they can't ignore anymore. What if the reason they were ready to walk away was never the real reason at all? That single thought has left them unable to make the final choice. Tonight, they believe they will finally close this chapter forever. They have already decided what they want to say and how they want to leave everything behind. But just before they follow through, they're about to discover something that has been hidden from them since the beginning. It isn't a coincidence, and it isn't something they can simply ignore. Once they uncover this missing piece, the goodbye they've been preparing may never happen the way they planned, and that's where the real story begins. A quiet realization has begun to replace their certainty. The closer they get to saying goodbye, the more they feel as though an important piece of the story is still missing. They keep asking themselves why your memory refuses to fade when every other chapter of their life has moved on. Last night, they almost convinced themselves to let go completely. But before they could, something unexpected interrupted that decision. It wasn't a message or a phone call. It was a simple reminder that brought back a feeling they thought had disappeared forever. From that moment on, their confidence began to crumble. Now they're searching for answers instead of excuses. They've started looking back at moments they once ignored, noticing details that never made sense before. The silence between you no longer feels empty, it feels unfinished. Deep inside, they're beginning to wonder if someone else's words influenced the way they saw this connection. That possibility has unsettled them more than they want to admit. Stay till the end, because the next discovery won't just answer one question, it will create an even bigger one. As the night grows quieter, they're preparing to uncover something they've avoided for far too long. A hidden truth is waiting where they least expect it, and once they find it, they won't be able to pretend nothing happened. The goodbye they've been holding on to is starting to feel less certain with every passing moment. But time is running out. One final choice is approaching, and the direction they take next will depend on a revelation that has remained hidden until now. The moment that truth is revealed, everything between you could change forever. They never expected the missing answer to come from someone who had been watching everything from the sidelines. During an ordinary conversation, a single sentence caught them completely off guard. It wasn't dramatic, but it carried enough weight to shake every conclusion they had already accepted. For the first time, they stopped blaming the distance and started questioning the story they had been telling themselves. If that story was wrong, then maybe this goodbye was built on a misunderstanding from the very beginning. That thought has refused to leave their mind. Since that moment, they've been looking at every memory through a different lens. The moments that once felt like rejection now seem filled with unanswered questions. They keep wondering whether fear disguised itself as truth and quietly pushed them toward walking away. The closer they get to the answer, the more they realize they may have judged this connection too quickly. But there's one memory they still can't explain, and it's the only thing preventing them from changing their decision completely. Tonight, they're about to face that memory one last time. They believe it will finally tell them whether they should let go forever or fight for what their heart has never truly forgotten. They don't know that another hidden piece is waiting to reveal itself before the night is over. When it does, they'll understand why every step that seemed to lead them away from you was actually leading them toward a truth they were never supposed to miss. As they searched for the answer hidden inside that memory, they noticed something they had overlooked countless times before. It wasn't the memory itself that hurt them, it was the meaning they had attached to it. The more they thought about it, the more everything began to feel different. They realized they had filled the silence with assumptions instead of truth. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking, "Why did this happen?" and started asking, "What if I never saw the whole picture?" That single question changed the direction of their heart. The deeper they looked, the more impossible it became to ignore the signs around them. Familiar moments kept returning in unexpected ways, almost as if they were being guided back to something unfinished. Even the words they once dismissed suddenly carried a completely different meaning. They could no longer convince themselves that forgetting you was the right choice. Yet one fear continued to hold them back. If they discovered the truth and it changed nothing, they knew saying goodbye would become even more painful than before. Just when they believed they had reached the end of the story, an unexpected discovery brought everything to a halt. Hidden among the answers they had been searching for was one final piece that had never been revealed. It explained why so many moments felt confusing and why every attempt to move on had quietly failed. They haven't seen that truth yet, but they're only moments away from it. And when they finally do, the goodbye they've been preparing may become the one decision they can no longer make. The closer they came to that hidden truth, the more their emotions refused to stay quiet. They tried to remain logical, but their heart kept pulling them back toward the moments they had almost erased. Every unanswered question now felt connected to something much bigger. They could sense that one important detail had been missing all along, and without it, every decision they made had been incomplete. For the first time, walking away no longer felt like the only answer. Then another unexpected piece fell into place. They remembered a conversation they had nearly forgotten, and suddenly the words sounded completely different. What once seemed like distance now felt like hesitation. What once looked like an ending now seemed like a chance that neither of you truly understood. The more they reflected, the more they realized someone else's perspective had quietly influenced the way they saw this connection. That realization left them questioning everything they had been certain about. Now they're standing at the edge of a decision once again, but this time their heart isn't as sure as it was before. They know they can't keep running from the truth forever, yet they also know the next step could change everything. Before they make that final choice, one last revelation is waiting to appear, one they never expected to find. And when it finally does, they'll discover why every path that seemed to lead them away was secretly guiding them toward one unforgettable moment. That unforgettable moment arrived much sooner than they expected. In the middle of an ordinary day, something small caught their attention and instantly brought every buried feeling back to the surface. They stood there in silence, unable to explain why their heart was racing. It felt as though life was refusing to let this connection fade away. The goodbye they had rehearsed so many times suddenly didn't sound as convincing anymore, because deep inside, they knew there was still one answer they hadn't found. The more they listened to that quiet feeling, the clearer everything became. They realized they had been protecting themselves from disappointment instead of searching for the truth. Fear had been making decisions that their heart never agreed with. Even now, they could feel the difference between giving up and finding peace. Those two things had seemed identical before, but now they understood they were worlds apart. That's why they hesitated just when they thought there was no reason left to stay. Tonight will test everything they've believed until now. A conversation they've been avoiding is closer than ever, and it holds the final piece they've been missing. They don't know what they'll hear, but they can already feel that nothing will remain the same afterward. If the truth matches what their heart has quietly been telling them, the goodbye they've been preparing for may disappear before it's ever spoken, but the next moment will reveal whether that hope is real or only another illusion. Just before that conversation could begin, something completely unexpected happened. They found themselves revisiting a moment they had always believed was the beginning of the end. This time, however, they noticed a detail that had escaped them before. It wasn't a look of indifference. It wasn't a sign that you had stopped caring. It was hesitation, the kind that appears when someone is afraid of making the wrong choice. That realization shook them more than they were willing to admit, because it meant they might have spent all this time running from a misunderstanding instead of the truth. As that thought settled in, the walls around their hearts slowly began to crack. Every excuse they had created for walking away started losing its strength. They could no longer ignore the feeling that this connection had been interrupted, not destroyed. Even the words they had prepared for their final goodbye suddenly felt empty, as if they belonged to a story that was never meant to end this way. For the first time in a long while, hope quietly returned, but it arrived carrying one difficult question they still couldn't answer. Now they're only moments away from discovering what has been hidden from them all along. Someone is about to reveal a piece of the past that changes the meaning of everything they've believed until now. Once they hear it, they'll finally understand why every attempt to leave has failed, no matter how determined they were. But the truth waiting ahead isn't just surprising, it will force them to make one final decision that neither of you can ever take back. They thought they were finally about to hear the truth, but the truth arrived in a way they never expected. Just as they gathered the courage to face everything, someone mentioned a moment from the past that had been completely misunderstood. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole story either. Suddenly, every painful memory began to shift. The goodbye they had been holding on to no longer felt certain, because they could finally see that one missing piece had changed the meaning of everything. For the first time in a long while, they stopped looking for reasons to leave and started wondering if they had been walking away from something that was never truly lost. That realization stayed with them long after the conversation ended. They couldn't stop thinking about the chances they had ignored and the feelings they had tried so hard to silence. The more they reflected, the more obvious it became that fear had been making decisions their heart never agreed with. Yet another question refused to leave them alone. If this connection had survived every misunderstanding, why did life keep bringing them back to the same unfinished chapter? The answer seemed close enough to touch, but something was still hidden just beyond their reach, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. As the night grew quieter, they made one final promise to themselves. Before saying goodbye forever, they would uncover every truth they had been afraid to face, no matter where it led. They had no idea that the very next discovery would reveal why this connection had never completely faded, even after everything that happened. Someone has been carrying a secret for far too long, and once it's finally spoken, it won't just change the way they see the past. It will decide whether this goodbye disappears forever or becomes the one decision they'll regret for the rest of their life. They never imagined the secret would come from the one person they trusted the least to have any answers. At first, they almost ignored what was being said, believing it couldn't possibly matter after everything that had happened. But then a single detail stopped them in their tracks. It explained why so many moments between you had felt incomplete, as if an invisible wall had always been standing in the way. The more they listened, the harder it became to hold on to the goodbye they had planned. For the first time, they realized that leaving now might mean walking away before discovering the truth they had been searching for all along. With every new answer, another hidden layer of the story began to unfold. They remembered promises that were never broken, only delayed by fear and misunderstanding. Even the silence that had once convinced them everything was over now seemed to carry a different meaning. Their heart kept whispering that this wasn't the ending they had prepared for. Yet one final doubt refused to disappear. What if they were already too late? What if the chance they had been hoping for had quietly slipped away while they were busy believing the worst? Just as they were about to make their final decision, something completely unexpected happened. They came across one last clue that no one had intended for them to find, and it answered the question that had haunted them from the very beginning. In that instant, everything they believed about this connection was turned upside down. The goodbye that once felt inevitable now stood on the edge of collapsing completely. But before they can choose which path to follow, one person is about to reveal a truth so unexpected that neither of you will ever see this story the same way again. The moment they heard that truth, everything around them seemed to fall silent. They had spent so long preparing themselves for an ending that they never stopped to consider another possibility. Every doubt that once pushed them away now began pointing them back toward the connection they had tried so hard to leave behind. They realized the goodbye they were holding onto wasn't built on certainty, it was built on unanswered questions. And now, those questions were finally beginning to receive the answers they had been waiting for without even realizing it. As their heart grew calmer, another realization took its place. This journey had never been about choosing between staying or leaving. It had always been about discovering what was real beneath the misunderstandings. The memories they once believed were signs of failure suddenly became proof that something meaningful had survived every setback. Even so, they knew one final obstacle remained. There was still one conversation that had never happened, one truth that had never been spoken aloud, and until that moment arrived, nothing could truly be settled. Tonight, they will stand at the edge of the decision they feared the most. they can walk away forever. Or take one last step toward the truth that has been calling them all along. They don't know that someone is already preparing to reveal the final missing piece, the one secret that explains why every road kept leading them back to this very moment. When those words are finally spoken, they won't just change the ending of this story, they'll reveal why this goodbye was never meant to be the final chapter at all. They thought the final secret was about the past, but they were wrong. The truth waiting for them was about the future. As they stood there, ready to close this chapter forever, they realized every event had been leading to this exact moment. The doubts that once felt impossible to escape suddenly began losing their power. Instead of asking whether this connection should end, they found themselves asking why life had fought so hard to keep it alive. That question refused to leave their mind, and with every passing second, the goodbye they had rehearsed became harder to believe. A quiet feeling settled deep inside their heart, one they hadn't experienced in a very long time. It wasn't certainty, but it was stronger than fear. They began seeing the distance between you in a completely different way. What once looked like the end now felt like an unfinished journey waiting for its missing page. They understood that silence had hidden more than words, it had hidden emotions, intentions, and truths that neither of you had ever fully expressed. The closer they came to accepting that, the more impossible it became to walk away without knowing everything. Then, just as they were about to make their final choice, one unexpected revelation stopped them completely. Someone had been protecting a truth they believed was better left untouched, but that truth could no longer remain hidden. Within moments, it would finally come into the open, revealing why every attempt to say goodbye had failed before it even began. And when that final piece is uncovered, they'll have to choose between the life they convinced themselves to accept, and the connection their heart has never truly been able to leave behind. The truth they had been waiting for didn't arrive with loud words or dramatic emotions. It arrived quietly, carrying a weight that neither of you could have imagined. As they listened, every misunderstanding that had haunted them for so long began to fall apart. They realized that what they had called an ending had actually been a pause filled with fear, unanswered questions, and untold feelings. For the first time, they stopped fighting against their heart. Instead, they let themselves believe that not every goodbye is meant to become permanent. The more they accepted that possibility, the more clearly they could see everything they had missed. Small moments they once ignored now seemed impossible to overlook. Every memory connected to another, revealing a pattern they had never noticed before. It was as if the pieces of a broken picture had finally begun fitting together. Yet one mystery still remained. Why had this truth appeared only now, after they had almost walked away forever? The answer was closer than they realized, and it carried the power to change everything once again. As the night drew to a close, they stood in complete silence, knowing the next few moments would decide the future of this connection. One final conversation was about to begin, and this time nothing would remain hidden. Every question would demand an answer, and every feeling would finally have a voice. But before the first word is spoken, one last unexpected revelation is about to emerge. A revelation so deeply connected to your story that once it's revealed, they'll understand why they were never truly meant to say goodbye in the first place.